Hey everybody, Chrissy here today, and I'm going to show you how to make these cards using stencils. So if you've never used stencils before, they're very, very easy to use. There's all kinds of different techniques you can do, but today I'm just going to show you a real simple technique, and it's just how to add ink to a stencil. Now, no matter whether you're adding ink or paste or paint or drawing, whatever you're doing, the most important thing is to adhere your stencil down so it does not move to your cardstock or paper or whatever you're using. So I use some repositionable tape. You can use washi tape or any type of repositionable tape that won't rip your paper when you take it off. So I secured it all down, and then I also secured it to my surface. So that's important too. You don't want it to move around too much. So now I'm just going and I'm adding in some ink. I'm going to use 3 different types of blue here, and I'm just going to blend them in using an ink blender. So I'm just going to go from light to medium to dark and then kind of blend them in. Now I mentioned before there's other things you can do with stencils. If you have any type of texture paste or embossing paste or anything like that, you can apply that with a palette knife or your fingers or cardstock. If you just want to draw, you can do that too with any type of like pen or marker. You can trace the stencil, anything you want to do. You can use paint, any type of like acrylic paint. You could even use watercolors. So really, stencils, you can use pretty much any medium that you can think of. Don't feel like you are going to be constrained to just ink or just paste or anything like that. So you can see I blended all the inks together, and then once I was done, I just peeled off that repositionable tape. And that's why it's so important that you use repositionable and not just like a regular Scotch tape or anything like that that won't peel off, because then you can rip your paper, and all that work you just did on your stencil can be ruined because it can rip off. Then I just blended in a little bit of that blue ink in the upper right corner. I just wanted to soften the paper a little bit because it felt kind of harsh being white. And then now I just took some of that same ink and I used a water brush and I'm splattering it on there, and I added a couple flicks of water as well. So I should mention that this is watercolor cardstock. And you can see that even though it's watercolor cardstock with a lot of texture on it, even when I blended the ink with stencil, it still looks pretty good. So now I'm going to continue on with the card. We're kind of done with our stencil portion. And I just stamped this cute little guy from the Childhood Friends set, also on watercolor cardstock. Just with some black ink, and now I protected it with clear embossing powder because I am going to watercolor him in. I'm using watercolor markers. So you can use really anything that you want to color this guy in. I wanted to go with watercolor because that background, it was kind of soft because I did it on the watercolor cardstock. With me adding some flicks of water and ink in there, I just kind of felt like if I had the image done in marker or anything else, it would just kind of pop out too much. So I wanted it to be soft the same way that the background kind of was. I mentioned you can use anything. If you want to use regular colored pencils, any type of alcohol markers, sparkle markers, watercolor pencils, whatever you want to do, actual watercolors, whatever you want to do, it will work with this card. Don't feel like you have to use the exact same markers or anything that I'm using here. I'm here to inspire you. So when I watercolor, and I'm actually doing it with the watercolor markers, but you can do it with ink as well. Some inks, you can kind of stamp it down like on a shiny surface and use a water brush, so you don't always have to have the watercolor markers. I'm just kind of scratching them there. You can see on the little grid I have, that's actually a glass mat, but you can use like an acrylic black. I mentioned any type of shiny surface, so even if you have a piece of acrylic left from like a stamp set, like the backer side of a stamp set, you can use that as well, a laminated sheet. Anything that it'll kind of pick up the color when you use a water brush, that will work. So what I basically do is I kind of start with a light color, and then I come in and I add wherever the shadows and stuff are, and I leave it kind of wet. I don't want it completely saturated, but I make sure it's a little bit damp, so it takes the work out of it for me, because then the water actually moves the color for me, and I don't really have to even do that much blending. So that's the beauty of using watercolors, and even when you use them for your backgrounds, is it just kind of works for you. So once that was done, you can see I cut it out. And now I'm just kind of laying out the rest of my card. I'm going to go ahead and stamp this little sentiment. It says, "Friends like you make the world a better place," which I think is so sweet. So I just stamped that on there. I used my stamping tool just to make sure that I got a good impression because I am using the watercolor paper. It's a little bit textured, so I wanted to make sure that everything got into all those grooves. That's why. So you can see here I used some 3D squares to adhere my little donkey. I had some washi tape on there. I ended up taking it off for the finished card. So here's both the cards. I'm going to show you some close-ups here. I did the exact same thing with that card. I just used a different dotted stencil. Same technique with the ink blending and everything, just different colors and different stencil. So thanks so much for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll give stencils a try. Thanks.